This video pertains to our start of our discussion on the judicial elaboration of the Constitution. We start off with basic concepts of legal hermeneutics, in this case, constitutional hermeneutics. Hermeneutics being the study of the construction or interpretation of the law, its words or phrases. So we have the basic general rule in the interpretation of the Constitution, that being that in case of doubt, the Constitution should be interpreted or considered as self-executing rather than non-self-executing. For most law students, what comes first to mind is this case of Manila Prince versus GSIS. In the case of Manila Prince versus GSIS, there was a question on who is be given priority in the acquisition of the shares of Manila Hotel, because in this case there was a conflict of two interests, one from a foreign investor and another from a local investor, a Filipino investor, who wants to match the bid of the foreign investor, Renong Berhad. No? The local investor was Manila Prince. So Manila Prince um, asserted that it should be given primacy in the bidding process, or it should be given priority in acquiring the shares of the hotel, because according to it in Section 10 of Article 12 of the Constitution, in the grant of rights, privileges, and concessions covering the national economy and patrimony, the state shall give preference to qualified Filipinos. In this case, the Manila Prince justifies its priority, that it should be prioritized because Manila Hotel has become part of the national patrimony. And because it is part of the national patrimony, its acquisition should be given to Filipinos first, no, the opportunity. According to the Supreme Court in this case, the provision found in Section 10 of Article 12 is self-executing. It's a mandatory positive command, which is complete in itself, and which needs no other further guidelines. What does this mean? While there are provisions under the Constitution that may require law in order for them to take effect, the provisions of the Constitution should generally be considered as complete in themselves and ready for execution, because they are the source of rights and obligations. While undeniably there are certain provisions in the Constitution that are not self-executing, or which requires additional legislation or statute for them to be effective, the Constitution is premised or presumed to be self-executing. So the Supreme Court says that a provision which lays down the general principles such as those found in Article 2 of the Constitution is usually non-self-executing, referring to the declarations of principles and state policies. But a prohibition which is complete in itself becomes operative without the aid of supplementary or enabling legislation, or that which supplies sufficient rule by means of which the right it grants may be enjoyed or protected, is self-executing, such as this provision, which is, in this case, Section 10 of Article 12. Further, the Supreme Court said, in self-executing constitutional provisions, the legislature shall still enact legislation to facilitate the exercise of the powers directly granted by the Constitution. Meaning, while self-executing provisions are good law in themselves, source of rights and obligations, the Congress may still also add to its teeth by giving it more emphasis through statutes or legislation. What is the rationale for this? It's very simple. Should the Constitution be interpreted as non-self-executing, make it as a general rule, then much of the Constitution will be left at the mercy of Congress, which could decide which provision selectively to be given teeth, or to be executory, and which should be not. Take, for instance, the anti-dynasty provision of the Declaration of Principles and Policies. For so long, the provision has been there, but since there is no definition given by statute, because the Constitution says the political dynasty is frowned upon, and it shall be defined by law. There is no definition of what political dynasty is. In the absence of a definition and a clear law on political dynasties, Congress still failed to enact such laws, despite that matter being placed in the Constitution. You could only surmise why. Okay. Unless the contrary is clearly intended, the provisions of the Constitution should be considered as self-executing, as a contrary rule would give Congress discretion to determine when or whether they shall be effective. So, an exact example of non-self-executing provisions is what you find in Article 12, National Economy and Patrimony, as well as some provisions there, no? As well as in the declarations of principles and policies. No? You see there principles which actually are not sources of rights or obligations, but they are incentives, inspirations for Congress to know what law or laws to enact. They also are guiding principles for the court, so that the courts will know how to interpret such a law under certain provisions of the Constitution by looking at the spirit of the law as found in the Declaration of Principles and State Policies. Take this case of Pamatong versus Comelec. Pamatong was declared a nuisance candidate. He relied on the provision on Article 2, Section 26, saying that the state shall guarantee equal access and opportunities for public service and prohibit political dynasties as may be defined by law. The Supreme Court did not give credence to his argument based on such provision of the Constitution, because the same is found under the Declaration of Principles and Policies, which are not self-executing. Please understand that there are three important rules of construction, which we also repeatedly make use in constitutional interpretation. Ut res magis valeat quam pereat, meaning the Constitution is to be interpreted as a whole, because it would rather prefer that the Constitution take effect rather than not. Verba legis, that whenever possible, the words used in the Constitution should be given their ordinary meaning, except when technical terms are employed. Third, there is ratio legis, meaning the words of the Constitution should be interpreted in accordance with the intent of the framers. This first is a construction principle of ut res magis valeat quam pereat, which was relied upon heavily by Justice Scalia of the U.S. Supreme Court. Literally, it means let the thing be more valued than it perishes, or it is better for a thing to have an effect rather than to make it void. This means that, therefore, the Constitution, in case of conflicting provisions, you do not invalidate the provisions of setting the one provision of the Constitution over another because of conflicts in content. What you do, you try to harmonize the provisions in the Constitution by reading them all together. This case of CLU, Civil Liberties Union versus Executive Secretary. Actually, this is a question on additional positions given to members of the cabinet. But the Supreme Court asked that the Constitution should be read in its entirety, because the Constitution gives you the impression that there is greater emphasis on the prohibitions for holding to additional offices for the members of the office of the President and his cabinet. It says that, in other words, the court must harmonize the provisions of the Constitution, if practicable, and must lean in favor of a construction which will render any word operative rather than not. This case of Tañada versus Engara is a very good example. There was hesitance into the entry of the Philippines to the WTO agreement. In the WTO agreement, the Philippines opens its market, its labor capital production to the world, making foreign capital and investment available to the Philippines. Oppositors object to this because it would prejudice for capital, deprive Filipinos of their privilege to be given first preference, and it would also prejudice Philippine products and materials and labor. Supreme Court said that we must read the Constitution in its entirety to give it effect. The Philippines did not intend, according to the Supreme Court, to have an to have the attitude of an hermit. We did not intend to isolate ourselves from the world. because in the intention of the law to improve the welfare and the lives of people, state according to the same provision, Article 3, which is Article 12, which is relied upon by the petitioner, says that the state shall pursue a trade policy that serves the general welfare and utilizes all forms and arrangements of exchange on the basis of equality and reciprocity. There is no intent to shut off the Philippines from the world. There is that possibility of the openness to the other possibilities, no, or on arrangements or exchange, no, to better the status quo of the Filipino through its economics. No? This case of Valenciano, letter of Valenciano holding religious rituals and laws of justice. This questions by a letter the practice of the courts in allowing masses to be held in its corridors, in its facilities. The, the complainant here says that allowing the Catholics to be used of the facilities for the holding of a mass is tantamount to violating provision on prohibiting public money or property shall be appropriated, applied, paid, or employed directly or indirectly. None of this property shall be made use for the use, benefit, or support of any sect. Saying that allowing mass to be held on those premises of public properties, it's giving favor to certain sector of the church. Well, for as long as you do not also deprive other faiths of the use of the facilities, that's benevolent neutrality. And there is no establishment of a religion that is what is defined as restricted under the law for the religious freedom, no? Separation of the church and the state, no? As well. Is that no law shall be made respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Permitting masses in the hallways of a public property does not mean that you are favoring a religion. For as long as it does not hamper public service, for as long as you also give fair opportunity for other faiths to do it, then no problem. Read the provision of the law so that you'd be clarified with what is the essence of certain other prohibitions in the Constitution. Therefore, verba legis non est recidendum means that from the words of the statute there shall be no deviation or departure. Together with index animi sermo, the speech is the index of intention. It says that whenever possible, the words used in the Constitution must be given their ordinary meaning, except when technical terms are employed. In the case of Michael Abasquita versus Senate. In the case of Ambagong Bayani versus Comelec, the Supreme Court said that only when the meaning of the words used is unclear and equivocal should resort be made to extraneous aids of construction and interpretation. Meaning, if there is no ambiguity, the general rule is read the law in its literal meaning, verba legis, as it is read and understood. Why? Because two reasons. It is assumed that the words in the Constitution are couched to express the objective sought to be a thing, meaning that the Constitution is worded out exactly as it is intended for it to mean. Okay? The ambiguity is intended, no double meaning intended. Second, the Constitution is primarily not a lawyer's document, meaning, remember the qualities of a good Constitution, broad, brief, and definite. A definite Constitution is a Constitution with provisions of which are clearly stated in exact words, no? Because it is not a lawyer's document. That lawyers have the skill of interpreting the law, but since it is the people's document, the people should not be burdened by over-interpreting the law. J.M. Tuason says the same also. It negates the power of the court to interpret when there is nothing to be interpreted, no? The language of the law must, as much as possible, be understood in the sense that they have been used in common sense. One exception is this one, no? Kasi you use interpretation, you only use verba legis when it really means what it means, but you interpret the law going beyond the words when words are used technically to mean something else. Like this term residence under the law for the qualification to hold office or be elected. Supreme Court said that the term residence in election law is interpreted as domicile. Residence is just the place where you live. Well, domicile, more or less, is the place where you intend to return and seek permanent residency. If election laws be interpreted, interprets residence to mean the place where one has a house or lives, then politicians could easily qualify for elections by buying or renting out a condo unit in a certain territorial jurisdiction of a district. Diba? So the intent is domicile. Where do you intend to return to or take permanent residence in? So that's why this is one example where the word residence is not used literally, but it's a technical term. Take the case of Republic versus Sereno. Sereno was removed by impeachment. Those who questioned the impeachment of Sereno said that, is it not that members of the Supreme Court, the justices of the Supreme Court may only be removed by impeachment? Supreme Court said no, because the word may is used in its provisions, saying that president, vice president, so on and so forth, may be impeached, or following officials may be impeached. The word may is permissive, meaning it entertains some other possibilities of removal from office, therefore, rather than only for impeachment. May is permissive. May is different from must, according to the Supreme Court. So literal interpretation of the word may. Case of Padilla versus Congress, also interesting, where Congress may convene to convenes to revoke revoke the declaration of the President of martial law or suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus. So here, Duterte declared martial law in Mindanao, owing to the fact that the Maute group took siege in some of its parts, endangering national security and in the entire Mindanao in the more microscopic level, the micro level. So the martial law requires actually, martial law kicks in several safety nets to prevent abuses of the president. One of this is that Congress, within 24 hours, must convene jointly and vote jointly to revoke the declaration or suspension if it so desires. But in this case, there is nothing to revoke because both houses of Congress already manifested their option to support martial law in separate resolutions. There was no need to convene. Kasi if you read the law, it says that una, well, the use of the word may convene, may vote, no, to revoke. It's not mandatory. There is nothing to revoke because separately they need no longer to revoke because separately they already manifested individually in both houses their support of martial law. Ratio legis et anima, the words of the Constitution should be interpreted in accordance with the intent of the framers. Simple, we interpret the Constitution not in its literal meaning but in what the framers intend for it to mean, when the interpretation especially leads to absurdity or confusion or inequity. Rivaldo versus Comelec says that the law must be understood by the letter that giveth life, not by the not by the letter that killeth, but by the spirit that giveth life. Interpret it in its essence, not on its literal interpretation or meaning, especially that if the literal meaning could lead to absurdities. This case of Macalintal versus Presidential Electoral Tribunal says that a doubtful provision must be examined in the light of the history of the times and the condition and circumstances surrounding the framing of the Constitution, meaning resorting to the stenographic notes, the records of the deliberations to enable us to understand the meaning, therefore, of the provision of law. Francisco versus House of Reps, it has been held that the court in construing the Constitution should bear in mind that the objects sought to be accomplished by its adoption, and the evils, if any, sought to be prevented or remedied. Okay. Now we come to this concept of originalism and living constitution. These are two popular concepts in the academic discussion of the Constitution. In originalism, we only understand the Constitution in accordance with how the framers intended for the words and the Constitution to mean. Meaning you go back to the original deliberations to know the original intent of the framers. That's originalism. while a living constitution allows for the use of metaphors, parallelism, over extension of principles to contextualize the constitution. Um, this is seen as that because sometimes interpreting the constitution in accordance with its original meaning or intent is sometimes unacceptable as a policy matter, and thus an evolving interpretation is necessary according to the proponents of the living constitution. And that constitutional framers specifically wrote the constitution to be broad and flexible. Remember the first quality of a good constitution: broad, followed by brief and definite. So the broadness of the constitution allow for the evolution of its principles. But it's opposed by originalists saying that the constitution really should be interpreted in its original meaning, because that's the real essence of the constitution. Allowing for an interpretation of the constitution under the living constitution principle would make judges capable of amending the law. They are not elected, and there is no provision in the constitution that allows amendment by the Supreme Court or by the court for that matter. The constitution must not be bastardized by interpretations of the judiciary that overextends its principles. So that's it.